What up, my fellow NBA lovers? And especially, what up to all my fellow Knicks fans? Now, this will be a continuation of my NBA Moments Pivoted series, where last time we took a look at the dynamic duo of Shaq and Kobe as they sat down together and reflected on their careers, and we looked at some of the nuances that took place that were kind of in between the lines. We're going to do the same thing here in this edition, which will feature Patrick Ewing and Jeff Van Gundy, in which they did a sit down to reflect their time in the Knicks organization from the transitions they made of dysfunction in the late 80s to the Pat Riley era of the early 90s to Jeff Van Gundy finally getting his shot to take over as the head coach, as he's been a Knicks assistant coach since 1989. Now, just to set the backdrop, the Knicks were able to acquire Patrick Ewing with the first overall pick in 1985, but in his first couple seasons he was battling injuries, but he showed huge potential as he was even selected to the All-Star game in his first season. But the Knicks also had a revolving door of coaches. In his first 7 years in the league, Patrick Ewing had over 6 different head coaches. But of course, in the 80s, they made the playoffs a few times. They got eliminated by more established teams like the Pistons and the Boston Celtics. And as the late 80s into the early 90s progressed, they were able to acquire a few key players that became cornerstones into the Pat Riley Knicks era. They drafted Mark Jackson in 1987. In 1988, they traded for Charles Oakley. And in 1990, they signed John Starks as a free agent. Now, when Pat Riley took over for the Knicks in 1991, he brought a very unique style and regiment to the Knicks that most NBA teams wasn't using. And that's a weight training and strength conditioning regimen that required players to show up to training camp with a certain amount of percentage of body fat and not allowing players to play their way into shape during training camp. Now, he also ran training camp all hours of the night, and they were long and grueling. And this is how Pat Riley got that reputation of taking at least 2 to 3, 4 years out of players' careers even to this day. Now, when you combine the type of strength and conditioning program with the type of gritty players the Knicks were acquiring years prior, you're going to have the formula for a very unique, gritty team.
Yeah, well, I still remember we went to Charleston, South Carolina, University of Charleston. And back then you didn't have guys come in way before training camp. It was like you came in, you took your physicals, Coach Riley had a running test you had to pass, and then we flew down. And so we had our first meeting. And our first drill at that training camp, I'll never forget, was a blockout rebounding drill. And I was down with the guards. It was Dick Harder and I were with the guards at the other end, and Pat and Paul Silas were with the bigs. And the guards were, they were working, but it wasn't like full bore contact. But I could hear at the other end, like these Brahma bulls just running into each other. And all of a sudden it was X and Mason going around the gym ready to swing. And it was a different level of physicality and a completely different level of intensity due to the roster and due to the intensity Coach Riley brought.
What do you remember of that practice, Patrick?
As you see, I'm here smiling because I remember, those two guys just banging. Everybody wanted to make sure nobody backed up. Everybody, all the testosterone was flowing. So those two guys wanted to make sure that they staked their claim. And at first we tried to break it up, but then we just said, you know what, let them go. Let them go. Fortunately, no one got hurt. Fortunately, no punches landed. But I believe that, just like Jeff said, the intensity has definitely changed. Our mindset about how we're going to go to war, because that's what Pat always talk about. You have to have the right mindset when we're going into war. Everything changed.
Now, that summer leading up to the 1991-1992 season, Pat Riley did acquire Anthony Mason as a free agent, and they also made a trade with the Phoenix Suns for a tough physical forward and Xavier McDaniels, in which he actually finished as the runner-up for Rookie of the Year, the same year that Patrick Ewing had won it. But a player like Xavier Daniels was a necessity for the Knicks because he can guard wing players. Because the Knicks, for the next 3 seasons, from 91 to 1993, they faced the Chicago Bulls, which was a team that created a paradigm shift in which they actually had wing players as their main component to the team's success. Most of the teams that were built through the 80s, 70s, and even early 90s were still built around the center being a key piece of the team. And the Bulls You just needed guys that was going to stop the wing players of Scottie Pippen and Michael Jordan. Now, Patrick Ewing and Van Gundy were asked to play Monday morning quarterback and to take a look back to see if the Knicks' actual roster construction made sense to defeat the Chicago Bulls with those two dynamic wing players. Because due to the fact that the Knicks faced the Bulls in the next 3 years, from 91 to 93 in the playoffs, and not having a dynamic wing player themselves, or at least a wing player that can make shots in the playoffs. Because to just give the ball to your key player, which is Patrick Ewing down low, he's basically gonna have to get a shot off in an area where the refs are allowing guys to be physical. That's why Jordan and Pippen were getting all the calls, because they were out on the wings. And the Knicks not having a consistent perimeter scorer, they could not utilize that part of the game. I mean, we didn't see the Knicks have one of those type of guys only until 96 when they signed Allen Houston.
We were an inside-out team. You know, the game is played a lot different now than it was back then. The centers were a lot more dominant back then than they are now. Michael and Scottie, they were dominant at the wings, and you know, I was the most dominant player on our team at the center position. John played his heart out. He played with a lot of heart and a lot of, you know, courage. He didn't back down any from Michael. Like we talked about, X didn't back down, and Oak was Oak. He is the enforcer. He became a better 3-point shooter, so he's knocking down shots. He was a fierce guy on the defensive end. He rebound. Also Mace. So the way that our team was built, it's about energy, effort, pounding the ball inside, spot up, knocking down shots. John Starks coming off pick and roll with the guards. So our team, that's the way it was built. And I guess like Pat Riley used to say, and to complement my style. Yeah.
Yeah, and for me, I think what was interesting is you have a guy and a coach like Pat Riley who came from the Showtime Lakers and then totally recreated a different identity with the Knicks team based on the talent. And when you look back, that first year we had Gerald Wilkins on the wing. And the one thing we were missing throughout the course of our time until we got Allen Houston was an ability at the wing position to go just get a shot. You know, it's so hard to play through the post late in games, the amount of contact that they allow, the different ways teams can get the ball or prevent the ball from entering the low post. You need a wingman to be able to go create your own shot. And when Allen came, he gave us that, but we had a really good team in 97, but I thought our best team was 93. I thought we were primed, but we just didn't have that shot creator that we needed on the wing.
Now, at the end there, Jeff Van Gundy referred to the 93 team needing a shot creator. It also applied in 1994, as also we seen in the NBA Finals that ugly Game 7 with John Starks taking all those shots. The Knicks also needed that consistent perimeter scorer there. Now, besides perimeter scoring, of course, with the Zen master Phil Jackson, there's going to be a lot of psychological warfare. Unlike the NBA of today, the NBA of the past used to allow the coaches and players to take shots at referees through the media in order to influence their whistles, whether they want the referees to tuck it in or just to keep the games tight. But Pat Riley, at the time, a 4-time NBA champion as a coach, was not having any of that shit.
You know, Phil was trying to do his thing to get to the refs through the media, and Pat was coming back. You know, Pat was, sticking up for us, and, he knew what our strengths were, and he wanted to make sure that we were able to play to our strength. It wasn't going to be a tight whistle. Look, Michael Jordan was great. If you give him everything that he wants, then it's hard enough to stop. So, if we're not able to play physical against him and try to limit the things that he can do, then it's going to be an easy series. So Phil wanted to make sure that, the refs make sure that it was a tight whistle. So if you blow on him, if you touch him, it's going to be a foul. And Pat wanted it the other way.
Yeah, except that he wanted Cartwright to be able to get away with what he wanted in the low post. It was two different things. But, also the way the league office has responded is totally different. They used to allow the gamemanship with the officials, and now the fines they come right away, and they come every time. And so you're really not allowed to have that type of back and forth about officiating. And I'm not sure it worked or didn't work, but no coach back then was going to allow the other guy to get what they thought was the upper hand.
Van Gundy also recalls battling the refs for having a soft spot for some of the star players, particularly the legend Michael Jordan.
It was more of a challenge. It wasn't going at Jordan as much as going at our team. But the funny postscript is we play Indiana the next night. So before the game, an old official named Mike Mathis, who I love, he's standing in front of me. He goes, "I see you're taking some huh?" And I said, yeah. He goes, "Hey, don't worry about your players as much. Worry about the officials, because he softens us up too." And I'll never forget him saying that, because that playoff series later that year, we played him in a playoff series. We're in the middle of a game in Chicago, 4 minutes to go, tough game. Jordan's cursing out this ref, Ed F. Rush. And after he gets done cursing him out, no technical, right in front of me, Ed F. Rush says, "Can I get your shoes? Michael, can I get your shoes after the game?" I'm like, what is going on here?
But the refs being a factor is a very small portion. You should always try to affect things that you have complete control of. And Jeff Van Gundy lets us know that this applies to that 1993 Bulls-Knicks series in which they were up 2-0 and they had their opportunity to win Game 3, but they were not prepared for the moment.
But the thing that to this day bothers me is that was the Atlantic City controversy with Jordan. And when we went to Chicago for Game 3 of that series, Jordan shot 3 for 18 in Game 3, but we were ill prepared to win that game. They beat us by 20 with Jordan shooting 3 for 18. That was our chance. If we had been right and ready that game to snatch that first win, we may well have gone up 3-0. Instead, it's 2-1. We play a much better Game 4, but Jordan gets 54 or whatever he got.
That is exactly what he got.
And yeah, not that I remember, but but we had our chance in Game 3, and in that game we weren't ready. To me, the two things that no matter what playoff loss we had or what playoff series that we lost that we felt like maybe we could have won it, it came down to turnovers, and we missed free throws in critical games. And I think Chicago, through this whole run, I thought the two things we struggled with the most was scoring because of their length and quickness and speed, and our lack of ability to go get our own shot on the perimeter. So that was hard for us. Their defense was much harder for us to solve. And obviously Jordan, the offense itself wasn't as hard, the triangle itself, but Jordan and then the offensive rebounding opportunities he created, because you're always in help situations. To me, those were the things that got us in the end.
Now, the following season, Michael Jordan went through his first retirement in 1994. The Knicks also made the NBA Finals that season. But prior to that, Van Gundy was asked about the Knicks' mentality heading into that training camp for that season. And he mentions how Pat Riley had set the tone, regardless whether Jordan was there or not.
Yeah, I was an assistant at that time, and I never thought about it from the standpoint of it opened up an opportunity, because we thought we had an opportunity. We were a 63-win team in 93, if I'm not mistaken, and we felt like we're the best team, and we were disappointed that we didn't finish that series off. And so in 94, Coach Riley had the mantra, be the first on the floor and the last off the floor. And so we had the first Midnight Madness practice ever for an NBA team in Charleston. I don't know if Pat remembers that. We scrimmaged. It was interesting. We scrimmaged. That's all we did. And we kept the old guys against the newer guys. And it was a wipeout, And so it was very interesting. It was either 93 or 94 we did that. I'm not sure exactly. But the point is like our mentality was we expected to win. And I don't think, because after that, then Indiana became really good. And Chicago was still really good. I thought the year Jordan left, it was the best the triangle was ever run. So I don't think it really changed how we thought as much, but to say that the door wasn't opened wider would be a misstatement too. Everybody thought that, you had a better chance with him gone.
Now, after the 1995 NBA season, Pat Riley had resigned from being the Knicks coach, and then he went on to sign with Miami. And at the time, this was very unusual, very unprecedented, I should say, that he signed with Miami as a coach and a president of basketball operations. So he was in charge of everything. Pat Riley at the time had 4 NBA championships on his resume as a head coach. So keep in mind, this is 1995. So I'm just going to make a reference to the Last Dance documentary. As you've seen, Phil Jackson in 1998 had a dispute with Jerry Krause on returning to the Bulls. He was given that 1-year offer. I believe that Phil Jackson wanted that same job that Pat Riley had gotten, because at the time, Phil Jackson had gotten 6 rings, 2 more than Pat did. And he probably wanted to be the coach and president of the team. But that's just something just to think about. But going back on the Knicks, in 1995, they hired Don Nelson as the coach. And it was rumored that he was trying to trade Patrick Ewing for Shaquille O'Neal. So once Patrick Ewing found out, they kind of had a falling out. But Don Nelson overall, when he came to the Knicks, he tried to implement a different style where they didn't run the offense through Patrick Ewing. The style of play was a lot different than the players were accustomed to, especially coming off of that culture that Pat Riley had built within the organization. Now, remind you, Jeff Van Gundy was still one of the assistant coaches.
Not to take anything away from Coach Nelson. He's a great coach. He's a Hall of Fame coach. He's done a lot of great things in the NBA, but his mindset of the way that things were a lot different than the way that we thought. He wanted to play through Anthony, and Anthony was a very good player. He's a point forward, as one of the terms that he used to use. But our team was built a lot differently. The way that with Dave Checkis and Ernie and Pat, they built the team a lot differently than the way that he wanted to play. So when Jeff took over and we went back to the way that we were all used to playing, it was like, Moses parting the Red Sea. Or Lincoln freeing the slaves. We were able to we were free again, getting back to do the things that we were normally we were accustomed to doing. And we were very happy that I know I was very happy that Jeff got the job. He's worked his way. He stood the test of time, and his knowledge, his work ethic was something that the job was his. And, like you said, we were already motivated. We were already a talented team. And we had a goal, which was to try to win the championship. And even though we got there in 94 and it didn't happen, we still believed that we had a chance or an opportunity to win one.
So Don Nelson eventually got let go, and then Van Gundy became the interim head coach. And of course, he became the permanent head coach after a while. But off rip, the players had a respect for Van Gundy as coach because he was with them through that culture that Pat Riley had built within the Knicks organization. That's how infectious the basketball mind of Pat Riley is, because most of the Van Gundy years were the after effects of Pat Riley being there. The DNA of the team remained operating under the same principles. It's really successful. You look at the Lakers, the Knicks, they had their most successful years, and you look at now in Miami. It's sort of a top-down militaristic culture that he has built.
The loyalty was earned. Like I said, he worked his way up the ranks. He came in as the third or fourth assistant, and he stood the test of time with his hard work, with his, he didn't get those. He still even have some of those bags on his eyes right now, and everybody's working from home. But the hard work that he put in, we were able to see it. We watched it. We watched him the growth. So we definitely believed in what he was going to tell us or what he was saying. And, like I said, when you have belief in your head, man, you're going to go out there and try to run through a bus or try to stop a bus for it.
When Van Gundy first took over the Knicks, there were some struggles here and there, but the team overall had great character. And that's one of the reasons New York City still to this day respects his team. A lot of the players had heart, they had self-motivation and determination. And even though Jeff Van Gundy made a few mistakes when he first took over, the team's character and genetic makeup allowed a lot of the mistakes to be masked.
That was an awful Philadelphia team, and we got hammered. And I just remember this, players are players, they get over things quicker. I'm sitting in the third seat behind the bus driver, which I sat there from the first day I was a Knicks coach to the end. And we bust at that time back from Philly, and there was a Philly cheese sandwich sitting right next to me that never got eaten. And we had those 72, what was going to turn out to be the 72-10 Bulls coming in the next game. And I think Philly had the worst record in the league that year.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like thinking the whole way as I'm watching the film, you are the worst coach who's ever coached an NBA game. How can you lose to Philly? You know, and then how many are they going to beat us by? But you got to remember back then too, we had incredible competitors. You know, Derek Harper was there, Charlie Ward, obviously Pat Oak, even though Oak was hurt at that time when I first took over, Starks, you know, so we didn't have a great team that year, but we still had a highly competitive team. I think what can't be overlooked is not everyone is as fortunate as myself when you're an interim coach to take over, first of all, a talented roster, a Hall of Fame player, but also a team that respected the position of the head coach. They may not have always liked every decision any head coach made, but they respected the position. There was no subterfuge. There was no going to the president or the general manager behind your back. There was no agents calling, you know, to beg for more playing time. You don't get that a lot when you first take over and you're a young head coach. Think of all the advantages I had. And you look back and you're talking about the Bulls. Frankly, what the Bulls had, like think about if you're Phil Jackson, you get to take over Michael Jordan in his prime. You don't get that very often as a first-time head coach. So I was really, really fortunate and grateful to those guys because certainly I made so many mistakes in those first 23 games of that season that I was thankful, A, they're good enough to overcome them, and B, to overlook them and still maintain a sense of loyalty to the position of the head coach.
Like I said before, the genetic makeup of this team is very infectious. It's so infectious that even the legendary Michael Jordan even recognized the passion of the Knicks team.
When you don't have to provide motivation, like I had Patrick and Harper and these guys, they were going to be ready to play. Like the only motivation that lasts in athletics is self-motivation. We had self-motivated guys. So in that game, we went up and then the Bulls caught us and went ahead. And I'll never forget, Patrick had a left-handed dunk in front of our bench. And then we had this three-point barrage in the second half. Charlie Ward, Hubert Davis, John Starks, they all made a ton of threes. Harper had like 3 or 4 in the third quarter. And I still remember after the game the next day, Jordan talked about the heart of the Knicks team. And I was always appreciative that even though some on his team didn't recognize our guys for their greatness and their intensity and passion, he did.
But overall, the players that came across the Knicks all the way from the late 80s to the early 2000s, and just all the Knicks teams that was assembled throughout the years, a lot of the players reflected the city. You can even look at the coach like Van Gundy. He looks stressed as fuck. He got the bags under his eyes. He looks like a guy that's doing 80 hours a week at his job, just like a lot of New Yorkers, you know, from the people who have the blue collar jobs that wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, hop on the subway, to guys like Latrell Sprewell that look like they'll fight you in a New York minute. A lot of the players that came across this team just represent the heart and soul and passion of the city. And that's why a lot of these guys, they weren't the most flashiest NBA players that had 360 dunks and just doing crazy things on the court, but their passion, no doubt, was unquestioned. It is what it is. Till next time, you guys stay safe. Peace.